Hey guys, Erin here from BC Global Investments. I want to talk to you a little bit about this development deal that I've been looking into. I was looking at land, 1.5 acres in Springfield, Tennessee, and the property was valued at, or was listed rather, at $185,000. I've been looking for a place that I can build some storage units, mini warehouses, and trying to find land that is pretty inexpensive, but also developable in the sense of like you don't have to move too much dirt because that gets really expensive. So you're obviously looking for the most cost-effective solution. So you either have to buy really cheap land to develop or find land that's pretty developed already or easy to build on, meaning like flat, and you can don't have to do a whole bunch of work to it. So I kind of found the latter, this $185,000 plot of land for 1.5 acres. It had a 9-foot differential from the front to the back, so it went like that. So that was the slope. I don't know what that slope turns out to be. But it also cleared already. There's only a couple trees, so we wouldn't have to worry about clearing, and leveling is fairly minimal, at least comparatively. So I looked into this because even though it was pretty expensive, $185,000 for 1.5 acres, you can definitely find land for a lot cheaper than that. I mean, there's some places you can buy an acre for $5,000. But you need to also make sure that it's in an area that will bring you traffic, because essentially 1/3 of your tenants, or the people that are going to rent that storage facility, are going to be drive-bys. So you need to make it visible from the road, and you need to make it easily accessible. So think about somebody who has like a boat or a trailer. They need to be able to easily pull into the unit, into the whole, facility, and turn around and all that stuff. If any of that's difficult, they're just going to pull out and not ever come back. So 1/3 is going to come from just drive-bys. 2/3, the other 1/3, making 2/3, would be from referrals, and the last third is from like deliberate marketing. So it's, once you build them, it's going to take you a little bit of time to fill them and actually turn a profit. Meanwhile, we were going to get a loan, a construction loan on the front side that would automatically restructure over to a long-term loan. And the way that looked was 5.75% interest only on the construction, and they would pay for 75% of the land. So we'd have to put 25% down on the land, and they would pay for essentially all of the construction as long as it came in under 90% of value. So whatever they deem the total value to be, they'd give you 90% of that. So hopefully that would cover all your construction costs, because if you don't have at least 10% of equity in there, it's probably not worth you pursuing this deal at all. It's not worth you spending what's going to take at least a year to do if you can't make at least 10% of equity, right? So keep that in mind. But when you're going through due diligence on this, it's kind of like a chicken and the egg scenario. Like, where do you start? What do you do first? Because in order to really know if this land is going to be profitable in terms of a storage unit and how much you can bring in revenue and income once you fill that storage unit, you need to do a feasibility study. If you don't have experience, if you have experience or know someone who has great experience, that's great. Or you can take a course too. They're probably going to cost you quite a bit of money. But if you're just looking at one plot of land, the thing that you can do that's probably most economical, most time efficient, is to pay for a feasibility study. What this looks like is it's about $2,500 to $3,000 on the front side to do a desk side feasibility study. There are companies that do this across the United States. So that's step one. Once they say, yeah, this is looking like it's pretty promising, then you'll do like a full-fledged feasibility study, which is going to cost you like another $4,000 to $5,000. But if you're like me, you're not just going to throw $2,500 out the window without even having an idea if this is the right place. So the very beginning of my due diligence, what I did was call around to all the storage units in this town, and there's only five of them. 2 of them were owned by the same company. So I only had to make 4 phone calls. And basically what I did was call them and say, I'm looking for a storage unit. I'm looking for more than one, maybe a couple. What do you have available? And how many, basically. And the conversation went a little bit differently depending on who I was talking to. Like, one of the companies outsourced it to the Philippines, so they were very like corporate, very scripted. but super willing to give me all the information. One of the guys was real local, and he was like super short with me. I think he kind of knew what I was doing. I think he knew I wasn't really looking to rent a storage unit, and he could tell I was kind of fishing, and he basically was like, look, I got 2 units. Like, if you want to run them, you better come get them today. So that was really telling to me, because no one had any vacancies. I mean, they had very few vacancies, and they were all renting for a good price. In this area is like $100 at least per unit, and they're like 5 by 10 up to 10 by 30. So that made me feel comfortable about taking it to the next step. So what I did after that was put in an offer, and my plan was, once we got it under contract, then I was going to pay for the feasibility study if those numbers worked. I began to apply for the loan before I put in the offer, because I wasn't sure if the seller was going to want proof of funds or not. Some sellers do, some sellers don't. Typically commercial properties, you don't really need proof of funds, but they might ask you for that. So you can link up with a bank or a private money lender and get a proof of funds letter if you need that. Of course, you can pay cash too, or bring investors together and pay cash. You can essentially do it however you want. But you don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily go out and apply for all these loans, because it might take you more than 45 days to actually get something under contract and actually begin the process to get a loan. And a credit check in terms of a lender is only going to be good for 45 days. So keep that in mind. So I wouldn't, in this case or any other case, do a background or a credit authorization until I'm close to being under contract, or I'm really about to get serious about looking and making offers. So that's just a side note. So anyway, we put in an offer. I told you it was for $185,000 was the list price. We offered $160 because that was kind of the number that I thought that made sense. They came back and they countered at $175. They were okay with our contingencies, which were 60 days of due diligence, which we needed because today's June 4th. We have to get permission from the city to build these mini warehouses. It's always a contingency. The city has to say yes. I've been told this is a formality, that as long as you submit the paperwork and do everything that you need to, the city's looking for development, so they're going to say yes. You just have to stay on track. So by June 8th, I had to have my packet in, my application with a $200 fee in order to request to get permission to turn this into a storage facility. That board meets the second Tuesday of every month, so they won't meet till July, and then I won't know until maybe the following week, like toward the end of July, but most likely at the end of July. So I needed a 60-day contingency period so that I could walk away with no penalty. They agreed to all that, but they countered at $175. So now I had a number to work with, $175,000. So I went back to the drawing board and I looked into what it was going to take to reasonably develop this land. And I essentially came up with based on the builder and based on leveling the land, paving pretty much all of it, because even though only about a third of it we would use for storage units, because you got to have like aisles between every bay so that people can pull their cars up and out. So we assumed a third of it would be actually developed, and the rest of it we would still have to pave. We'd also have to put a fence around the entire thing and secure it with a gate and a remote gate, and then also have all kinds of security. So all of that came out to, they could do it as little as 110 a square foot, but based on our land and based on how much dirt they would have to move, they were thinking about a $160 per square foot. Then you have to look at the cost of money. We would have to pay for interest 4 to 6 months after we close. We're going to order all the materials, and it's going to take 4 to 6 months just to get the materials in. So we're going to pay for interest on this land for that amount of time, but it's not going to be making any money. We're not even going to be making progress. So you got to keep all that in mind. Like, know what your timeline is so you can plan for how much interest you're going to pay. So you got to consider interest. You also have to consider taxes and insurance. In this case, I was going to set up a syndication, so bring a bunch of investors together. We'd have to set up an entity and pay all the legal fees to do that. You also are going to have to pay for, like I said, that feasibility study. You're going to have to pay for blueprints. You're going to have to pay for somebody to go out there, survey the land, and show you what you can build on there, and you have to pay for all that. So when I crunched all those numbers, I essentially came up with a dollar amount of $199 per square foot to totally develop and build these storage units. What they're selling for right now is $200 a square foot. So there's not a whole lot of leeway in there. It's 0.5%, right? So 0.5% of equity on a project that would take me 18 months. And I would have to put in a lot of time and effort and money to get this done. And there's no guarantee that's even how it's gonna work. Like, it's pretty conservative, but anyone who's done construction before knows, like, things are gonna happen. Things are gonna change. Maybe there's a crazy snowstorm and we get delayed even further. So you gotta plan for all those contingencies, and those numbers don't even really have any contingencies built into them. So for that reason, I did not get the property under contract and decided to move on from it. And I feel really good about that. So I'm gonna share this with the people that were interested in syndicating with me. I offered these syndication opportunities to my course, the people in my course. But I have another one that serendipitously just came through last night. So I'm gonna send that to you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Even though I probably, you could say I wasted like maybe 10 days on this deal, I learned so much, and I built some relationships with the city, and I feel really confident that if another plot of land comes up that maybe is more favorable, I think we need something bigger and something that costs a little bit less, because we just need to kind of spread out. We need to be able to build more on it, and then we can make more of a profit. So notice that my whole entire assessment was based on a valuation, because that's all I have to go off of right now, because I haven't done the feasibility study. So I don't know how much income this property can make. But again, that's not going to happen for 18 months or maybe even 2 years from now. And so at this point, I'm not comfortable taking this on. I'm not comfortable endorsing this opportunity or this deal to my investors. So there's other ways you can do it, other ways you can look at it, absolutely. I'm a firm believer that there's plenty of deals to go around. There's land, there's constantly land for sale, constantly real estate for sale. So I'm willing to wait for the next one, but I hope you learned something from this. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Erin, ERIN, at bcglobalinvestments.com. Bye, guys.